It was a fateful Friday in Jerusalem. Clouds gathered ominously over Golgotha, the hill where history would be torn in two. At the base of 3 crosses, a Roman centurion stood firm, carrying out yet another grim task, another crucifixion. This time, it was Jesus of Nazareth. His orders were clear: ensure that Jesus died, and that is exactly what he did. As the 6th hour approached, a deep darkness fell over the land, lasting until the 9th hour. It was then that Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then, with one final cry, he breathed his last. In that instant, the veil of the temple was torn from top to bottom. The centurion, standing at the foot of the cross, looked up and said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." That moment marked the beginning of a profound transformation for this Roman soldier. The man who had overseen the execution of Jesus was shaken to his core. In a matter of hours, he would go from being an executioner to a witness, from stabbing Jesus with a spear to becoming the first Gentile to believe that he was the Son of God. No longer content to serve the empire that had shaped his life, he turned his back on his status and became one of Jesus' followers. He traveled to distant lands, spreading the gospel with the fervor of someone who had witnessed the impossible, whose life had been utterly changed. His tragic end is recorded in church history under the name Longinus. Before that dark Friday, Longinus had been a Roman centurion. Centurions were the backbone of the Roman military, commanding over 100 soldiers, admired for their strength, courage, and battlefield prowess. To rise to this position, one had to be not only physically strong, but also sharp-minded, strategic, and above all, ruthless. Longinus was exactly that. His life had been defined by discipline, obedience, and violence. He had witnessed death countless times and executed orders without hesitation, becoming a true instrument of the empire. But that day would change everything. It was early morning when whispers began to spread through the city. The name of Jesus of Nazareth was on everyone's lips. The night before, he had been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, betrayed by a kiss from Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, who sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. He was brought before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, where he was condemned for blasphemy after claiming to be the Son of God. But they lacked the authority to execute him, so they brought him before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. Pilate, sitting at the judgment seat, looked at Jesus curiously and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered calmly, "You have said so." The chief priests and elders continued to accuse Jesus, but he remained silent. Pilate, perplexed, leaned in and asked, "Don't you hear the charges against you? Aren't you going to defend yourself?" Jesus said nothing. Pilate was astounded. He had seen criminals beg, lie, and weep for their lives. But this man stood in overwhelming calmness. Just then, a messenger rushed to Pilate with an urgent message from his wife. "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered greatly today in a dream because of him." Pilate, unsettled, saw an opportunity during Passover to release one prisoner. He offered the crowd a choice: Jesus or Barabbas, a notorious criminal. The crowd, stirred by the religious leaders, chose Barabbas. Pilate, uncertain, asked again, "What shall I do with Jesus?" The crowd cried out, "Crucify him!" Pilate, desperate, questioned, "Why? What evil has he done? But their response was more furious than before. Crucify him! Pilate realized he stood powerless before their rage. He washed his hands in front of the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. His fate is in your hands. Pilate then released Barabbas and handed Jesus over to be crucified. The soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium. Longinus stood at the entrance, as always, overseeing the cruel punishment. He had witnessed many executions, but this one felt different. Jesus, the prisoner before him, did not resist. He did not scream or curse. He stood quietly, as if he knew this was meant to be. The soldiers mocked him, dressing him in a purple robe, crowning him with thorns, and placing a reed in his hand as a scepter, bowing before him mockingly. They spat on him, striking him on the head with a stick. But Longinus did not join in. He simply observed. Something stirred inside him. The man before him, beaten and humiliated, bore a dignity that Longinus couldn't quite grasp. As they prepared Jesus for crucifixion, Longinus couldn't take his eyes off of him. Why did this man not fight back? Why was there no hatred in his eyes, only compassion? Longinus was about to witness something that would change his life forever, the greatest act of love the world had ever seen. Jesus was led through the streets to Golgotha, the hill of skulls, the place of crucifixion. Crowds shouted insults and spat upon him, but some wept in silence. His mother, Mary, searched the crowd for her son. When she found him, she rushed to his side as he collapsed under the weight of the cross. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. I am here, she whispered. Mother, I make all things new, Jesus softly replied. His words were not for comfort, but for prophecy. Despite the pain, he spoke of renewal. He fell again under the weight of the cross, but Longinus only watched, his heart stirring with confusion and wonder. As they reached Golgotha, Jesus was crucified. He did not resist or curse. He offered his body willingly, as if surrendering himself to something greater. The soldiers hammered the nails into his hands, and the crowd reacted. Some wept, others mocked. Longinus, however, stood still, his mind racing. As Jesus hung on the cross, one of the criminals beside him mocked him, but the other, recognizing Jesus' innocence, said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus replied, Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Longinus, hearing these words, was shaken to his core. He had never witnessed anything like this before. Jesus, in his final moments, spoke not of revenge, but of forgiveness. A storm rolled in as the sun darkened. Jesus' voice, though weak, called out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some thought he was calling for Elijah, but Jesus refused the comfort of vinegar offered to him. Jesus, with his final strength, declared, It is finished. Then he bowed his head and died. At that moment, the earth trembled and the temple veil tore in two. The centurion Longinus, standing in awe, dropped to his knees and declared, Truly, this man was the Son of God. Longinus, the soldier who had overseen Jesus' death, became the first Gentile to acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God. But his journey did not end there. For days, he could not escape the memory of that day. The image of Jesus' silent, dignified suffering haunted him. He resigned from his position in the Roman army and began his journey of faith. Longinus traveled far and wide, proclaiming the message of the one he had once crucified. His testimony, powerful and personal, moved many hearts. Eventually, he was arrested and executed for his faith. But Longinus died not in fear, but with peace in his heart, echoing the words of Jesus, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Over time, Longinus was venerated as a saint. The centurion who had pierced Jesus' side was now remembered not for his violence, but for his witness, his belief, and his sacrifice. And so, through the centuries, Longinus' story lived on as a testament to the transforming power of the cross. Longinus was no longer a mere soldier of the empire, but a soldier of Christ, whose faith turned him from an executioner to a martyr, whose story continues to inspire and remind us of the boundless power of redemption.